GM. GM. Today is Friday, 17th of May. Looking at daily levels. So Bitcoin, very promising. Looking good. It has broken down. Or sorry, not broken down. It has failed to break down. Held up. Positive ETF flows again. We've seen 2 days now. 300 plus 257, also 100. So 3 days in a row, well, 4 in a row with positive flows, 3 in a row with above 100 million. And we haven't had that for quite a while. So there's definite shift here. Last time we had that was early April, right? There was the last 3 days in a row with over 100 mil flows. And so we've had 6 weeks almost of negative flows, and just negative in terms of both actual red days and low days. But that's shifting, so it's good. BTC, I talked about this, when it rallied up to here, what you basically want to see is for it to consolidate in this area. So attempted to break down and failed, and I'm expecting it to follow something like this path, and if it does, we start building swing longs as it consolidates. Really simple. It's back above the 50 EMA on the daily, and the bands are now turning green. And that would indicate for me that I would start to open swing long positions targeting the high with an invalidation of price losing these two levels. So initially, if I was building swing longs in here, I'd be looking at BTC to, if we go down to the 4 hour, we'll see. A couple of ways this can form. It can either have a sideways compression before going higher, or we might see some kind of upward sloping accumulation. They're the two paths I would expect to see if it's in a bullish setup. At this point, if it loses the 4 hour bands, it doesn't make it bearish, but it probably leads it back down into this area here for that 62 to 64k zone that I talked about, which would just be filling in an inefficiency, right? So down to basically this area. That itself would be obviously not as strong as the first two paths. It wouldn't necessarily be bearish though, but it probably would lead to more chop. I think if we lose that level, it comes down here, I don't think it'll be like a fast reclaim. It'll probably be more chop, maybe an equivalent amount of time as what we had spent in there, right? Moving down, popping up, come back down, chop, 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 and then away it goes later on. But I think there's a bit of momentum behind BTC, so I'm quietly confident that we can see it continue to trend towards the range highs. The first thing to watch is this level. These stops and this liquidity level here, that's the first place where Bitcoin can have a proper rejection. So in the upward sloping path, I'd expect it to reject, but as a false breakout, so basically a bullish upward sloping type of move like this, right? You see it rising, or a sideways correction. And the sideways one, it can probably go down as low and sweep that if it goes, to the extreme. Take the stops of anyone who's getting long here, because people will certainly be trying to re-long Bitcoin. Right, people who are sidelined, they'll be trying to re-long it. Their stops will be there. So those stops I wouldn't say are safe. Main thing though is, like I said, I think it was yesterday or the day before, we got a daily close above 64 and 65. That's good. We've now had a second day. We've had positive flows on both of those days. A third day, Friday, end of the week, that would close the trading week with Bitcoin reclaiming 65 with positive flows, and the band's green obviously, and that would set up the best trades for me. Now let's just look at the 4 hour trend. 50, 100, 200. They're crossing, but it's not yet in a 4 hour uptrend, right? It's been in a 4 hour downtrend all the way from mid-April. You got the 50 now coming back above the 200 and the 100. So soon Bitcoin will flip back into a 4 hour uptrend, which doesn't mean that it necessarily just goes straight away up only. See here's where they crossed back in January. As they crossed back to bullish, we had more consolidation, from the 1st of Feb to the 7th. So we had a full week of consolidation as the bands crossed bullish. Then the next breakout, that was where it expanded. And you want to see contraction before expansion. We've had lots of contraction here at the lows. We've had a lot of compression, so that's good. Bitcoin can absolutely continue moving from here. Two other areas I want to look at is this one. All right, the last time we had, when we had lost our 4-hour trend here. Over in this area, we started to see them reclaiming. So Bitcoin moved up, the 50 above the 100, but not fully above the 200. Then all three in line at this point here, 50, 100, 200, after a pump. That pump was premature. It took out the highs. It dropped back. But the 4-hour bands remained bullish all the way, even through the dip down. They only briefly, 50 lost the 100, but quickly reclaimed. And after that impulsive candle there, when the 50, 100, 200 got back in line, that was your sign. 4-hour trend was defended, and away it goes. So if that was to happen now, where are we? We're somewhere like here, if that was to happen right now. That would mean that we could pump at this point. We could pump from here, take out these stops, and end up having more consolidation, right? And then 2023, the summer move, the fast move. This is the one that I had initially been looking at Bitcoin and thinking this is how it looks like. Now, if this was to happen, you're seeing Bitcoin basically break out shortly, maybe even today, break out strong and just trend straight to the range highs. You can see it go all the way back, right? You don't get a chance for trend confirmation. By the time the 50, 100, 200 are in line over here, by the time they're in line, price is already at 30K. And then it consolidated on the bands, and obviously we know what happened next. So the main thing to note is in all three of those examples, here, January, here, and the October one, so the June 23, October 2023, and January 2024. The last three times that Bitcoin reclaimed its 4-hour trend in a bull market, the bottom was in. That's the important part. So if Bitcoin does reclaim its 4-hour trend, which is basically guaranteed at this point because of the way the bands lag, in a couple of days, these will flip back to bullish. That would indicate the bottom's in. Again, it doesn't mean it definitely is, and it doesn't mean that you just get long at this point and it can't go any lower. It can come all the way back down. It can even dip below them and reclaim them. But it's yet another confirmation that the bottom is most likely in, and that you're either going to see a new trend up or chop, but still chop that stays above 57. And so that's when you can start to frame higher time frame swings. And if you look at it in a really simple sense here, if I'm looking at Bitcoin on a fresh chart and we're looking at, here we go, we're looking at daily and we're looking at the bands, and the bands are green. I take off all of those and just look at the daily bands. Now the daily bands are green. If you're saying bottom's in, right? There's your lowest point. Should have that there. Lowest point won't go below there. That opens, in theory, this entire zone to still be bullish. It might just be wicks, right? It might consolidate in here. You might see wicks like that. It's all still bullish, right? But Bitcoin could do that. It could take that high. It could drift. People have gotten themselves too long. Oh no, dips down, everything gets bearish, bounce back up. If that happens, don't forget the confirmations you already have that the bottom is in. This would be just a shakeout to trap people, get them bearish again before we go. A lot of people are like, well, no, look, it's consolidated. It has to do this. It has to go straight up, or it has to just trend nicely to the highs and boom. It doesn't have to. The bottom can be in, and it can still go down. It just can't go down past 56. That's basically all you're saying. Everything I'm seeing now is telling me Bitcoin bottom is in. At this moment, and certainly over the next couple of days, you're going to get more and more confirmations that the bottom is in. But doesn't mean that getting long with leverage at 66 is easy, right? Because 62 can come extremely easily. We can go up, we can go sideways, we can go to 60. We could sweep out those stops I talked about yesterday. All that can happen while it's still a bottom. So your goal is basically not to panic and flip your bias and go short and fucking, think it's all over if it's in this zone. The earliest that I would say is, price really becomes bearish is 58.2, which is that old pivot from 2021. This level, it was the February high, and then resistance on the way down. If it loses that level, you can say, with a daily close, you can say that's very weak. So again, just like the box I'd drawn, that still gives you all of this area where you could see price come into. The ultimate shakeout, which remains bullish, would be to come down and attack these lows, where Bitcoin takes those stops and then continues on. And so as we're getting these closes, I'm starting to build initial swing positions, or I will be. Like I said yesterday, the plan is, first of all, we can go to range high. Whether we break out from there is not really my concern. And in terms of sizing up on them, you actually want to buy breakouts, right? Meaning, intra-range, the 4-hour bands, the 4-hour trend. If you're building initially a position because Bitcoin's daily bands are green, if I was building that initial position, it would be on the basis that this level does not get revisited. We don't go below 62 right away because Bitcoin's daily bands are green. It's above 64. It's above all those levels, right? So I would have my initial swings, smaller size if we're here, right? If we're doing this, smaller size with an invalidation at 62. Or, below 62, yeah. So invalidation would be about 61, whatever. Anywhere in this zone, it shouldn't get hit initially. Then, if it's correct and the bands cross, you wait for whatever price action occurs. It could be choppy and messy, and you wait for the confirmed breakout of whatever consolidation we get. That's when you size up fully, and that's when you put your stops in and move them up. Because at that point, your swing would then be moving along Bitcoin's daily bands, wherever the bands happen to be at that point. At that point, if you had that chop, and then moving up, you'll see it here, right? If you had this chop around and started to move up, the daily bands are green, and the bands are going to have come along here. Just mark them in green. The bands are going to have come along something like there, and as we start to move at 68 and higher, your bands are going to be at 65, 66. Stop loss would probably go below 64 at that point. So you'd move the stop up from, 61 up to about 64, below 64. That would also put it below that volume profile distribution I've talked about for ages. And that should be your trend support if it starts to move higher. The mistake people make is putting their stops too tight when Bitcoin is not and has not formed a consolidation yet, right? This is the exact same as somebody getting long here and trying to put their stops there or there or there, right? And then it just drifts down, stops them out, and then it's just consolidation and continues. You've got the move up, right? But after the move up, we're going to probably consolidate. So you have to allow that to happen. You can't put stops there for a high time frame swing. You have to have wider stops here. Again, let's back to the daily. If you're trading this on the daily, and as it's a swing trade, I base my swing trades on the daily bands and daily market structure, and or the 4-hour 50, 100, 200, right? So if you were just long, I wouldn't advise it, but if you're just getting long right here, right now, your stop has to be 61. You want it to be below the last interim low, so this last red daily, before the breakout above the bands, before the breakout above the green bands, before breaking out above 64, 65. That gives you a lot of support. That means price has to get back through 65, back through 64, it has to lose the bands, and it has to retrace the entire impulse pump to stop you out. There's a lot that needs to happen there. You're like, oh, but that's a 5K, stop loss, 66 to 61. That means it's really hard to get this massive win I want. You're building a position though, because then if that goes to the high, it's only 1.5. You're like, oh, 1.5 is not great. You're building a higher time frame position. The idea of this, remember, you should be holding spot anyway. I'm holding a bunch of spot Bitcoin. So regardless of what happens, if Bitcoin goes up, I make money. And altcoins, of course. But your swing, this is the initial part of it. If you're adding a swing trade on, you have to have your invalidation. But the goal is once you get confirmation, you tighten that stop up or you add to the position. And the idea would be if, and this is where really the basis of trading is, you're doing all this building so that if Bitcoin actually trends up through the range and has a full breakout, and then that's it, right? We never come back to here again, or not till the bear market, then you've had a position built from 65, 66, maybe even a bit at 64. A small amount, and you add to it on the way up, and you move your invalidation up, so that if it does break out, you've built the majority of your position below the breakout, and then the breakout comes, and then you're riding it with a really low entry. And if it doesn't, you will get out at break even, right? Because if it does come up, and you're built, and you built, and you built, and it hits all-time high, rejects, comes back inside, it's going to come back down, and that false breakout, rejection, comes back in, you're going to close your position. Because remember, you're not trying to have a leverage long open for the whole bull market. That's dumb. You're trying to time the actual breakout. If it doesn't, you cut that trade, you go back to spot. And so your spot bags remain open. Your trade entry this time failed, but it didn't fail, right? It was just a probabilistic bet. Tried to get it, didn't happen, cool. We wait for price to come down, take out people, wait for it to do the same thing and start to build again. Once it starts getting back over those levels, you build it again, and eventually there'll be a breakout that sticks and you'll be long for it. You have to treat all of these areas as if they are going to be the breakout, and also be mindful and ready and know that they're not going to all be the breakout. So if you don't, right, if you don't treat each consolidation as potentially the next move up, once it gives you confirmation, right? It doesn't mean you're buying here and you're buying here and you're buying there. That's fine if you're buying spot. You're buying spot when it's down and it looks bearish and it's ugly. But if you're adding swing longs, if you're adding a leverage trade, you are trying to time the market. Timing the market means you're getting into the area where it should not go lower, right? Buying Bitcoin here is not timing the market. Not getting long Bitcoin there is not timing the market. Not for a swing. That's guessing the bottom. This is also guessing the bottom. Those areas are fine to buy spot. But if you're trying to actually get your entries, and by the way, these are fine to long as well, but the longs are generally shorter term. You should really be getting in, taking profit at resistance, especially when it shows weakness. And that'll avoid you round tripping, and opportunity costs and sitting in these leverage longs where like you get leverage long here and that's the bottom, and then you hold it and it comes all the way back and it stops you out. Because you had no confirmation, no green bands, no key levels reclaimed, right? Still a bearish structure. That's all shifting now. We have green bands, we have bullish structure, we have low, high, higher low, higher high is now forming. That means a higher low can form anywhere in here. So that's how I'm looking at it. Position building will be happening over the next few days, couple of weeks maybe. A fast move can happen. This is the first thing I talked about when we were down here. I was like, if Bitcoin can break up from there, you can see it move fast all the way to the range high. If that happens, though, I'd be less inclined to think it's going to break out and hold. It probably creates a lot of FOMO. But the thing to watch for that is, you want to watch for when people start to get overall long again, long BTC. So look at funding rate, which has been, since the 13th of April nuke, has really been flat, neutral, negative. and there's no change in that yet. So from a funding perspective, that's fine. Spot premium has existed all the way here. That's why this is white. Still have the spot premium. Now, like I've said, spot premium is bullish when it's trending up. So it was not bullish over here because we weren't trending up. It was a short squeeze, right? It was just a corrective move. And then we went to new lows. But since then, up, high, low, and higher high and higher low. That is an early stage uptrend with spot premium still there. That's what you're liking to see, especially if Bitcoin makes yet another, right? Makes yet another breakout level and the spot premium remains. Even if it decreases, it will decrease, but if it remains, that's a sign again. Rallies being led by spot, all looking good. And then by the time we reach all-time high, you're probably going to see a big uptick in funding where it goes back to, positive, and probably spot premium disappears as people just try to chase it on leverage, as they do. And you probably see open interest ramp up. I mean, this is one of the most predictable things in the market. As it goes towards all-time high, people are going to try and get long. They can't help themselves. They just can't. Everybody wants to catch the next big move, especially when we've had months of chop, where a lot of people probably lost a lot of money. They've probably bleeding their portfolio down as they try and catch every long that should be a day trade. They're trying to turn it into a fucking position trade. And so, that's still a way away. We'll see what happens as it comes into those levels. But that's where I'm at. So, that's about it. GM. Not much else to say. I'll see you all later on the live stream. 4 p.m. UTC. Casual Fridays. GM.